What's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Wellman's Podcast. My name is Brian Brosi. I'm joined by my friend and co-host Keoni Tita. Keoni, how are you today?
I'm doing wonderful. Hi, everybody. Thanks once again for listening to us. Today, I thought a great topic would be just talking a little bit about morality. And I think it is applicable to, being a healthcare provider. And also, I just want to bring up the thing that got me on the topic, or that we talked about, was two wonderful books that I just recently read, which we'll hit on. And one is called Different by Franz de Waal.
Okay.
Great book, and I'll talk about it briefly a little bit. And then the other one is another one by Phil Zuckerman, like what it means to be moral. So anyway, both these books kind of just got me thinking, because I have, in a lot of discussions that I've had on like social media forums and stuff, we've gotten into like discussions about morality, like what's your basis of morality if you don't have a religion that you focus on, specifically Christianity, since this is, what me and you both growing up in this country have been exposed to for the most part. I mean, I know not everybody, but the majority of people in this country will identify as Christian, compared to other belief systems.
Yeah.
But that's a big thing that got me thinking about it, because it's like, okay, well, where do we really get the basis of our morality from? Is it from a religious text? Is it from that we get it? And I think in part maybe it is, but I think it's secondary to that, and that only being part of our socializing, the people that we are conditioned to be around, and our group that we're in. So for example, if you are a church going individual, yeah, I think I certainly would say that the Bible would probably shape that, but I certainly wouldn't go to the place where that is, the basis of morality, like I think some people seem to imply. So for more of a scientific perspective, where does it come from? And I think if we're gonna talk about it, then we also should kind of define what we're talking about. And I know a lot of people kind of throw these words out. I do the same, where morality and ethics are kind of like interchangeable, and I think they are. Like, where do your ethics come from? Where do your morals come from? I just, and we'll probably, in our discussion, Brian, we'll probably throw them out like that, like so, and they kind of do mean the same thing. I just think of morals being more personal and ethics being more a standard that society like kind of puts on you, so to speak, or expects of you.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think it just basically comes down to trying to reduce harm or suffering in beings, humans, animals, and that type of thing. So not causing any unnecessary harm or pain. The other ways of saying that: easing or relieving suffering, offering help or assistance.
And you're saying this is being a moral person?
This is kind of defining what we mean by morality and morals.
Okay.
Right? Like, what are we actually defining it to be? And I'm listing these out because I think most people would agree with this, right? Comforting those that are vulnerable or weak, like trying to help others to feel supported and safe. Being honest, conscientious, caring, working to increase the health and happiness of others. This really speaks to the Physician's Creed, right? The Hippocratic Oath. But I think everybody gets this. Treating the golden rule, treating others the way you'd want to be treated, right? And we talked about that a little bit on the last podcast, saying that the golden rule really is something that most societies throughout history have something like that as part of their morality or code of ethics.
Right. And I'd make the argument, when we're talking about where does morality come from, there's like this innate kind of feeling of the golden rule, and maybe that's why it does kind of transfer between so many cultures and various histories, and like we were talking about religious text, where the morality almost feels innate. It almost doesn't feel learned. And I know something we're going to get to, a little later, but it does feel like I'll feel better feelings when I do all those things we listed that are like good moral things for other people.
Right. Right. And I think that speaks, what you're saying there is the whole basis of why we want to talk about this, right? Because it does feel innate, and what, when we really think about it, I think we can make a really good case for it to be in mostly innate.
Right. Right.
Um, so I just think that
And what you're saying is not something that is coming from this built up societal context, aka
yeah,
religion or whatever the case may be,
right, right.
the laws
But
that we do have.
in yeah, in some aspects, maybe, but I think innate, I think our genetics play a big role to that. I think
Mhm.
our modern hunter-gatherer ancestors, or or modern hunter-gatherers, or our ancient ancestors, it was part of group think, group communal living and that type of thing that helps shape morals. So we'll talk about that a little bit more here and go into the reasons why I'm going there, and I think you are too. But I also, when people think about morality, it's really not a black and white issue, and so I don't want to come across that way. Like there are things out there that are good morals, and there are things out there that are bad morals. It really lies on a spectrum, right? I think most people would agree it's really difficult in your particular society or whatever to be a perfectly moral person all the time. But then on the other hand, I think most people would agree that genocide is probably on the other hand of that. Most people would agree that's immoral, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a spectrum, and it's a continuum, and it's based on society. So
Kind of talking about the gray areas that do exist.
right. So just a quick example, somebody who lives in a very fundamentalist Muslim country, a woman who covers herself, right, completely. Like, to us, we may consider that immoral, but to them, they consider that moral. So
Mhm.
it's the context on where you are born and living and that type of thing. So
Right.
there's this it's a gray area. And for example, it's another example would be like, how do you even define a crime? Like, is crime ultimately stealing something? Well, what if the person's really hungry and starving and steals? There's a good case to be made that that shouldn't be a crime.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's kind of like this, it's a very subjective
Yeah, it definitely
thing.
tugs at your moral heartstrings.
Yeah, right, exactly. um
Which is where that gray area develops. This is where this is where the waters start to get really muddied.
right. So a lot of the very old codes of ethics, like one of the oldest is codified in the Code of Hammurabi, is written out on a stone tablet. And to us reading it today, it seems like a very immoral thing. Okay, somebody who steals should be put to death right away. It's like, end of story. Or slavery is okay. And then you compare that to something like the Declaration of Independence, that life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. That now you're getting to what I'd call more moral progress with those things. But again, you got to take it in context of where that stuff is coming from. But I will say that as humanity becomes more global, and we learn from each other and talk to each other, you really do see kind of like this moral progress throughout history. So it reminds me of that book written by Steven Pinker, Enlightenment Now, that talks about, we are living in the best of times right now, right? There's not, even though the world, you look at the news and you're like, man, the world is getting ready to just implode on itself, and we live in the worst of times. When you actually look at all the prosperity measures, we actually live in the best of times compared to what's going on. So, the rate of poverty, people dying of diseases, public sanitation, healthcare, all of this stuff is better and better with each passing decade, even though we just been through hell for the last couple years, right, with the whole COVID stuff.
Right.
and still going through it.
Yeah, it is really I'm already just deconstructing my opinion about it not being societal, and it very clearly being something that is like generationally societal, that has improved to this point where we have this innate, you know, different
Yeah.
things like the acceptance of homosexuality recently type of thing. And now that is
Right.
just more or less a foregone conclusion and part of
Oh,
our everybody's vernacular. You know, it's just perfectly okay across the board. And not too long ago, it wasn't. And
not
this
too
is just
long
like
ago,
these
like let's talk
societal
15.
changes that
Right,
are
right. Not
evolving with us and within our genes, basically, as we pass them on and continue
right.
to have this progression.
Yeah. And it really does come down to like keeping the debate alive and the discussion alive, with all that stuff. But yeah, homosexuality, like really only, I mean, in the 80s was stigmatized big time. I remember that. I remember going to high school in the 80s and how, that was like the worst thing you could be called in high school, being called gay or something like that. And now it's almost like a code of honor, or it shouldn't be stigmatized. And anybody who says that to anybody is going to be shamed for saying that,
Right, right.
or looked down upon for saying that,
Yeah, there's a lot more societal barrier to allowing the stigma in general, but those types of stigmas to fester and continue in this generational kind of innate sense
Yeah.
of ethics or morality.
Yeah. And I even
Thank
think
God.
like, yeah, no, yeah,
Funny to say
right.
thank God there too.
Yeah. Thank good.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so it was even considered, I think even in the 70s, 60s, I know in the UK, homosexuality was considered illegal. It was, imprisonment. Even today, in some countries, if caught, it can be a death sentence.
Mhm.
So, which sounds horrific, right? I mean, it's just awful. But compared to what it was even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we are moving along that moral spectrum, for the better advancement of all of us.
Right, right, right.
So, but anyway, getting back to, why are we saying that it's inherent? Well, one of the biggest things would be, I think, let's talk about evolution and specifically humans, how we evolved. Humans.
From being nice to a girl, caveman.
Yeah, yeah, right. It wasn't. Well, let's turn it on its head. Like, I think a lot of people think that, evolution is survival of the fittest, like the biggest and the strongest, bash them on the head type person, authoritarian type figure is the person who wins and gets to pass on their genes.
Mhm.
And that is unfortunate because the theory of evolution is turning that upside down, where it's really, instead of survival of the fittest, it's more survival of the friendliest. And with humans, there's no way, Brian, that me and you could be doing this podcast today if our ancient ancestors did not work together in groups and work together. And so there was always this in-group think, and the in-group think was, how can we look out for each other? Because you certainly wouldn't want to be looking out for just yourself, right? I mean, if you did that, you wouldn't last very long. So we are communal social animals. And when you're a communal social animal, over millions of years, your genes kind of get programmed to kind of have this, empathy and compassion for others, and to help others. So if you're in that in group, that's the group that you take care of. And so all the way up until, probably just, I don't know, until we started building cities and coming together in larger and larger groups, yeah, it was a really precarious situation because, your small group was the in group and the other small groups were the them, and the outside group. But the nice thing that's happened as we have grown as humans and populated the planet is there's this two-way flow of information that kind of gets us, especially today, and it's getting more and more, that kind of gets us to think globally as all of us being the in group now, so that may be one reason why, there's less wars, less less hate and evil in the world, even though it's there, right?
Right.
But now, people are realizing that we're all part of the in group, and that even applies on to onto animals. So survival of the friendliest is kind of
Even just in
turning.
like the context now of like mutually assured destruction, where it's like we all are kind of on, we are have to be in this together. We like
Yeah,
have to be like the cat's out of the bag. There's nothing we
yeah,
can do about it.
yeah.
We have to have this kind of group think. And
Right, right. And it's better that we do.
right, yeah.
Also, and then the book that I was just showing you, Different by Franz de Waal, which is a great book anyway. The book goes into our most our closest related relatives, chimps and bonobos. Bonobos are a type of chimpanzee, or really, and then chimpanzees, the stereotypical chimpanzee, they both kind of look the same. But what's really interesting about both of them, the bonobos are more matriarchal society, and chimpanzees are more patriarchal, and we all have a common ancestor from millions of years ago. So studying them, it really gives us some insight into us. And in both of those groups, what we find is tons of evidence of both bonobos and chimps being very altruistic with each other, even to the point of like, chimpanzees, for example, can't swim. And if there's been
I
instances
did
where a
not know
chimp
that.
would fall into like a moat, and another one would jump in there trying to save it, knowing that it should not be
Mm.
in there because it can't swim, that type of thing. But it goes way beyond that. If either chimps or bonobos have one of them in their group or clan has an injury, they try to take care of them, try to nurture them, and there's cooperation for finding food and stuff like that. And so they have a lot of the stuff of our better nature. That's not to say they're perfect, because it's very interesting. Chimpanzees certainly have known to murder other chimpanzees, usually not within their own group, although that has happened. Usually groups outside of them. So you'll see like clans of chimps monitoring their borders, and any outsider chimpanzee is considered just that, an outsider. And what's really interesting with bonobos, on the other hand, is there's never been an instance of them murdering any other bonobo. It's never been documented. And it's hilarious, because when they meet another group, a foreign group.
Yeah, it's because they're always horny.
Yeah, right. So the way they get rid of tension is through sex and bonding and stuff like that. And they're actually kind of that other better nature of humanity, where it's almost like you are enveloping or wanting to meet, an outsider, because it will enhance your group. It's kind of that thing. It's almost like looking for diversity to enhance you. But both of these groups, like bonobos, are very matriarchal, and so are chimps. But both of them, it's not about the strongest. I mean, there's certainly an alpha male, alpha female, and all that stuff, but it's not just about the strongest. It's about creating relationships between individuals in both these different species and of ape. And that's how you get the alpha and the alpha female and the alpha male. And it's not necessarily the strongest. It's like the one who can help promote the group the best.
Yeah, politics the best.
Yeah, there's a politics to it. Absolutely. There's definitely a politics to it. And then the other way is, let's come back to us, is what do we see with human babies? So, when we're born, we are helpless, at least for 2 years, completely helpless. We have to be nurtured by our moms. Our mothers did not read a text to learn that is innate. That's showing nurturing, compassion, empathy for a young infant that is helpless. Also, infants need that bonding, and the research is pretty clear that if children or infants don't have that bonding, or that maternal bonding, they are more likely to commit crime. They are more likely to show lack of empathy and compassion. They're more likely to be a hindrance in society. So, and the other thing that's really funny about babies, there's a study done where they were shown, like, I think these babies were like 1 year old, and they were showing them a puppet show, right? And one of the puppets is trying to open a box, and is really having a time trying to open, just getting ready to open, and another puppet jumps on top of the box and shuts it. So the babies were more apt to show compassion and want to help the one trying to open the box. So that's kind of thing. Or like a ball being, being rolled away from somebody who wants it, the babies kind of want to help get the ball to the person. So the studies on it's pretty neat. So they're showing a propensity. There's a strong propensity, even at a very young age, for humans to show like this kind of helping nature.
Right.
And then how about our brains? So one thing about our brains are we have this hormone called oxytocin, and it is one of those hormones that, the mother child bond is really enhanced with this hormone floating around our brain. It also is a type of hormone that allows us to bond with people that we deem to be in our in group. On the other hand, it also has a kind of an evil side to it, to where it also will say, well, I don't want to take care of the people that are not in my in group also. But that hormone also plays a role in how our brains are shaped to show compassion and empathy and help others based on that hormone alone. So there's studies that show that. And then basic caring. We see that in all mammals for the most part. And it was really interesting. I showed a video on Facebook the other day, and it's fascinating. There's this turtle in a puddle. It's turned upside down. And it's like struggling to turn itself upright. And there are all these other turtles around. They all came and turned them upright. So what do you call that?
Right.
It seems like, some empathy and compassion to me.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, it's and you see these instances over and over again. There's studies of this is a funny study. They did a study on not apes, but monkeys, where they have this sense of fairness. And so they had two monkeys in a cage, and each monkey could see the other one, and they were feeding both of them cucumbers, and both the monkeys are in love in the cucumbers. And then the experimenter switches to grapes and and gives only one monkey the grape, and the other monkey is like getting jealous about that. And they've done studies where the monkey getting the grapes will actually share eventually with the other one.
Eventually. Yeah, after I get my mask on first, Jim.
And then you hit it on the head with what we were talking about at the beginning, socialization. Being socialized and growing up in your culture, you kind of get a sense of your morals. And this is where religion can play a role, but it's really based on more of your culture. So how you grow up, what you're taught, really shapes your morals and your ethics. If you're going to be a bully, eventually you're going to get shamed for it or beat up to the point where you're going to learn to act different in society, or if not, you're going to be locked up, that type of thing.
Right.
Also, the other thing I want to bring up is, and we talked about this, where it's not black and white. Like, so for our society, monogamy is the norm and considered more moral than polygamy, right? But in other societies, polygamy is the norm and monogamy is, looked down upon. So again, society shapes all that. For example, in our society, women shaving their legs, that's kind of like, and in other societies where women don't, that kind of, you're internalizing that socialization of what's kind of expected of you in society. So a lot of it is, what are those influences that we're getting in our culture that help shape that. But the basis of it really is, our pro-social behavior and our cooperative, how we cooperate, our tendencies to do so. And that really is kind of set in our evolutionary past. And that evolutionary past is kind of like the thing that gives us the impetus or the proclivity to treat others with compassion and, and empathy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things I wanted to bring that up and do a podcast on that, because I think it's important to say that, there's so much more to it than just reading a book and getting your morals from a book. Like it from a scientific perspective, there's so much more to that. And we see it even in our closest relatives.
Are there people, Keoni, that I mean, I guess there are, it's a dumb question, but would argue that like without religion, there's no, or
Well, yeah,
their religion, I guess they
right.
would argue.
Right. Without knowing their religion, you have no basis of morality. And I would just say our basis of morality is found in our evolutionary past. So it's inherent, it's hardwired into us. So, it goes back to that golden rule, which I think, I think is a great thing, and I hear a lot of Christians say it, but it is not a Christian saying. It's not inherently a Muslim saying. It again, that golden rule has its roots in our evolutionary past.
Yeah.
And it was codified actually in ancient Egypt long before the Abrahamic religions came about.
Mm. So it definitely, yeah, a lot of arguments to be made, but I mean, it definitely has to be to some degree innate in our evolutionary upbringing for it to even exist. And in theory, we created these religions as well. So these religions were probably crafted out of our innate sense of morality when these rules were drawn up, ordained by God or whatever that may be.
Right. Yeah. So I would say the evolutionary past begets the religious ethics and morals, as opposed to the other way around, if you want to go there, of course. I mean, and that makes sense, right? I mean, as we evolve, humans developed religion based on really stuff that we didn't know, but also seemed to fit and make at the time, I would say, the culture better or unquestionable. Yeah. But it's like, everything evolves. I mean, I think that's the one constant we can certainly say, and you even see that with dogmatic thinking. Eventually that evolves, but that evolution happens through I think a couple things. Seeing all of humanity, and we really are starting to see that now, where we are a global economy. Ideas get exchanged over and over again, even if even if you're like some lost tribe in the middle of the Amazon that nobody's ever seen, or we don't know about. There is information that eventually crosses between groups. Nobody lives in isolation on this planet, is what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. And by the exchange of ideas and stuff like that really helps us evolve and progress as being more of a moral society that's progressing, in an optimistic and productive way.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to our last episode about, what is it? The only answer to the human existence, or the existential problems of human existence, is love. And it just keeps circulating back to this.
Yep. Yeah. So and that's the golden rule. And again, I think it's not an tangible thing or an object thing that we can grab hold of, but everybody has an idea of what it is. And I think everybody has an idea of what that is because we inherently know.
Yeah.
And that's based on our evolutionary past.
Yeah. Anything else, Keoni?
No, I think that's it. I'm interested to see what people will say about this.
Yeah, write us an email. All our contact stuff is in the show notes, so you can get in touch with us, get in touch with the podcast directly or us individually. And then I did want to ask Keoni, you heading to Hawaii, or what's going on? Are you sending us a message?
My family just got back from Hawaii, and and if you don't know this yet, or people don't know this out there, Keoni is Hawaiian for John. So, and my family has a lot of history in Hawaii. So my mother is Portuguese.
It's like,
and so
okay.
Hawaii is part. Yeah. You're just now getting that?
No, and you know how many people have asked me how you got the name Keoni, and I don't
Yeah.
know. So
Now you know.
that's a very good origin story. That's like a deep cut there for the podcast. That's
There
awesome.
you go. That's right.
Okay, and
Yes.
is that so? Is Keoni something you adopted, or you basically were given from your mother by birth? She called you that all the time.
So my grandfather on my mom's side is his name is John.
Uh-huh.
My grandmother for is Hawaiian. Um, she always called me. She just said Keoni, and my mom always just called me Keoni. It just means John.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
So
All right.
that's how I got the name. So, but yes, my legal name is John, but I've never, in third grade, I remember my teacher calling me John, and I was like, who's she talking about? Because I didn't know. I always knew Keoni.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
that's awesome. All right, well, cool. Thank you for telling us.
Yeah, yeah.
All
All
right,
right. Till next time.
till next time.